Hey guys, welcome back. So now we're getting back into Dark Web with the matchup of Spider-Man versus Chasm. And at this point, I'm kind of glad to see that Ben has proved my theory right, as far as him holding back a few tricks and saving some of his new moves and abilities for the fight between him and Peter Parker. And I mean, aside from the fight, there are some other abilities that he shows that we'll talk about later on when we get to the Venom tie-in, but for the most part, he really lets it out on Peter because he's not holding back. And with that said, let's get into it. But first, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to catch us spills every week. And don't forget to hit that bell up top so we can squat up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so with how this begins, we jump back in with Chasm, who has made his way back to Peter after making his rounds. And when Ben gets here, he begins to tell Peter how he remembers the events of Amazing Spider-Man issue 894, with him trying to get Peter to use the brain machine to give him his memories back. And we talked about how at the time Peter didn't want to do it because he didn't trust it, and how that led into the whole crazy fight with Ben falling into the psychoreactive goo, which had caused him to become Chasm. But now here's the thing, when Ben comes back, he's like, okay, where were we? And then he takes a moment to tell Peter how he remembers their fight at the Beyond building. But when Ben tells this story, he makes Peter look like he was on demon time, because Ben takes all the events that we had seen and he turns it all upside down. And he starts off this story by saying that he had asked Peter nicely to put on the memory device, and he claims at the time Peter said, okay, he'll help, he'll do it. To where then Peter just took the device and broke it maliciously and laughed at Ben, only to then kick Ben into the psychoreactive goo. And with seeing Ben tell a story like this, like, I'm not gonna front, it's kind of giving me some Bully Maguire vibes here. Just a little bit, or maybe a lot of bit. But I gotta admit, it's kind of funny seeing this because we know it didn't go down like that. But at the same time, it's also showing us how crazy Ben's mind's been warped, and potentially how this reconstructive psychoreactive goo may have also reconstructed the memory that Ben wanted to believe. So he may honestly believe that's what happened. And that may very well be the case, because Peter tells Ben that he thought Ben had lost his memories. And in response, Ben is like, yeah, that part's a bit foggy too. But with this being the case for Ben, it keeps him locked in that villain mode, and it gives Peter no other choice but to try and stop him. But with the two of them get to fighting in this crazy possessed New York that has like demon possessed scooters and things of that nature, I'll admit it does get a bit ridiculous, because at one point when Peter hits Ben with a scooter, that's asking the whole time like, what I gotta do with this fight? Why you bringing me into this? And with seeing that, I was kind of like, really? Did we really need the scooter to enter the chat? But I guess I get it. It was just bound to happen at some point. But also within this fight between Ben and Peter, we are given a moment where Ben starts to show us that now as Chasm, he has a few new tricks up his sleeve with the experimental psychoreactive goo causing his spider sense to passively defend him. And it gets even crazier because aside from that, he can create a variety of different weapons as opposed to just shooting webs. And I gotta say, for Ben, ever since this whole transformation thing with him becoming Chasm, I've been waiting to see for a while what new abilities he's had with this. And for me, this whole reactive spider sense slash construct creation kind of thing, I think it makes a lot of sense because the psychoreactive goo was supposed to recreate that entire level of Beyond building. So for me, like, in my opinion, it was going to either disfigure Ben grotesquely, or it was going to give him the power of creation to some extent. And fortunately for Ben, it was the latter of the two. But with Ben whipping out these new powers on Peter in a fight, this totally catches Peter off guard, because now he's finding that Chasm is a lot tougher than what he had initially expected. But then after this, we head over to Madeline Pryor, who's made her way to the treehouse with Hallows Eve and Eddie Brock. And it's here where we find that Madeline's made her way here to get the backup memories of Jean Grey. And with how this is done, she's really just using Eddie as a bit of a distraction, while using Hallows Eve to send Eddie in, while also putting a spell on Eddie so that Hallows Eve can see what he sees. Because now with Eddie being the distraction, Madeline's able to send in Hallows Eve to physically enter the treehouse and go after these memory backups, since Madeline's not allowed to enter the treehouse herself. And I mean, really, she can enter the X-Men treehouse, but the catch was when she became the Queen of Limbo was that she couldn't go in with any malicious intent. And this is the reason why she's using Eddie as a distraction and sending Hallows Eve into the treehouse to go in and physically take these backup memories, because Madeline can't do it herself. But for the most part, this portion of all the action is covered in Venom issue 14, and we'll definitely cover that in a separate video because there's some very Venom specific things happening in that issue that we gotta get into. But at this point between Peter and Ben, as the fight continues, they exchange hits, so on and so forth, but I gotta say there's a clear winner here, and Ben doesn't shy away from letting Peter know that he's been giving him that work, because now Ben has all the power, and some, without the responsibility. And I gotta say that at least for this issue, with us seeing Peter being bested, we're given this from Zeb Wells with Peter being able to keep at least a bit of his dignity, because prior to this, like the whole entire rest of Amazing Spider-Man Volume 6, Peter's been getting baptized like every other issue. And I mean, it almost feels like Zeb Wells don't even like the guy. But no, seriously, like I'll give it a break and then I'll come back and next thing I know, Peter's lumped up again. And I mean, it's either that or the fact that he's still not over Mary Jane, even though she's clearly moved on. And I mean, it's like, man, like when is it gonna stop? Or when is it gonna change? But yeah, that's enough of the rant. Where were we? Oh yeah, that's right, Chasm beating the brakes off of Spider-Man. But again, I will say that the beatdown is not as bad as what we've seen so far throughout this series. Though with how this is presented, Chasm is not holding back, but Peter is. Hence the reason why he is catching these hands so consistently. But also with Ben serving Peter this fade, he's letting Peter know that with him holding back and Ben not having to, this is precisely the reason why Peter won't be able to stop him. And with how this continues, it goes beyond just the fighting. And I say that because we know that Ben Reilly and Madeline Pryor have little to no care for anyone being harmed in the process of them getting what they want, even if they consider that person to be an ally, i.e. their quote-unquote partnership with Eddie Brock, which really is more or less them using him as a pawn and robbing Eddie of his memories just so that Chasm can get his back by eating Peter's soul, which is messed up. And even though Chasm doesn't go into full detail as far as his plans and intentions, instead he just lets Peter know that Peter's not ready to go as far as Ben is actually willing to go. Because for Ben, who during his most recent time as Spider-Man had been manipulated by Maxine Danger and the Beyond Corporation, this broke his mind prior to his transformation into Chasm, which I'll admit in hindsight did seem like a bit of foreshadowing. Back when he first got mad and broke the mirror, that was definitely a red flag. But with Ben missing Peter's memories, there's no memory of the lessons that Uncle Ben had taught Peter. All of that's gone for him now, so there's no limit to how far Ben will take it. But even with that being the case, Ben does share with Peter what he's been doing this whole time since Peter's fight with Venom, which once again was just a distraction. But it's here where Ben, or Chasm, shows Peter that he's paid a visit to a couple of Peter's old friends, Robbie Robertson and J. Jonah Jameson, who he's already dropped off in limbo, where they may or may not survive. And for Ben, this is him showing Peter how serious he is, with Ben gambling with the lives of Peter's friends. But here's the thing, like when Peter tells Ben to let them go, Ben tells Peter that they'll have to go to Limbo in order to do that. So then eventually Peter's like, fine, take me to Limbo. And right there, that is us seeing a glimpse of the plan. Because if Ben can get Peter to willingly ask to be taken to Limbo, then he is one step closer to finessing Peter into eating from the Tree of Exquisite Liberation. And as we know at this point, once Peter has done that, it's pretty much a wrap for him. And as it stands, Peter's just walking right into it, while Ben is blatantly telling Peter that he is taking the bait because some spells require a little participation. And I mean, really, it is just like that. Peter falls for it. And I mean, it's not even like he falls for a trick. He jumps into it. He jumps into the trap while he's being told that it's a trap. And easy as that, Ben, aka Chasm, has Peter sent to Limbo. And in the blink of an eye, Peter is transferred back into his old news photographer clothing as he finds himself in a demonic bullpen. But now with Peter being sent to Limbo, Ben on the other hand said he's gonna take his time and enjoy this, rather than just finishing the job, because that's how villains move. And so now real quick, I want to give a special shout out to all the patrons. Thank you guys for all of your support, and for anyone who's new here who wants more information on how to support the channel, I got a link below to where you can go to patreon.com/dopespill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and we'll do it again in the next one. Alright, later.